Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Tuesday, June the 13th, 2023. Kind of shifting gears here as we head into the summer. I think I mentioned if you were in church or you listened to the church service on Sunday, the narrative lectionary kind of opens up the summertime for doing other things. They give some suggestions, but what I've elected to do is kind of have two sermon series. The first one is going to be about the Old Testament patriarch Abraham. Who I'm calling the father. Well, I'm not calling him. He was the father of the faith. And so we began in the very end of chapter 11 in the book of Genesis and the first part of chapter 12. Today I want to just look at that first verse in Genesis 12, which reads as follows. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. It's a big deal, moving. There's an Australian pastor by the name of Ross Cochrane who says, I understand the upheaval of moving to a different city, packing endless boxes of books, dismantling beds, throwing out all the junk we've accumulated over time. Big job, and I can attest to that. Then watching a huge truck back into our driveway, take it all away. We've done it all. We've done all that many times in our lives. But that was just from one state to the next. I can't imagine moving to a different country. And in my sermon, if you haven't heard it, if you go back and listen to it, I talk about the fact that my wife, Jeanette, and I, we've moved 12 times. 7 of them were in the first 5 years while I was finishing up seminary and then going to my first call. But we also, at the end of the service, we knew this was coming, but this was going to be the last Sunday one of our members was there. Her husband is actually over there where they're moving to. Say that about that in a second. Her sons just couldn't get them up and going, but we did farewell and Godspeed to her, really, and her whole family. They're actually moving to Dubai. So I can't imagine that move. And she said that they've moved 19 times. So I felt, a little foolish about the only 12. This Ross Cochrane goes on to say, I was speaking to an English couple who had moved to Australia recently. They spoke about the trauma of uprooting yourself from your country, your relatives, your friends, your home. It extracts a huge chunk of your emotional well-being, he writes, which, like other household items, has to be packed in a box and left to deal with at the other end of the journey. You deal with it then, but please, not now. And that's, what we're seeing here in Genesis, that Abraham is being asked, Abram at this point, he's still called, to pick everything up. And his family doesn't have any children yet. Actually, Cochrane goes on to say, if you have kids, you know the routine. 5 minutes into a trip, they're saying, where are we going? When do we get there? Are we there yet? He says at least Abram didn't have any kids because he would have had a difficult time answering those questions. He didn't know himself that he was the child and God was the one driving the moving van. Interesting thought. Then there's a pastor by the name of Aubrey Vaughn who had a different or a unique way of looking at it. He said, God is behind our lives. These days, most people have the wonderful blessing of a GPS in their car or on their phone that directs them in their travels. The GPS directs them to their given destination. It knows the start from the finish. Well, Abram, he points out, had a far superior GPS for his journey of faith, God himself, and so do all Christians today. God will lead us on our journey of faith and take us to our given destination if we're prepared to trust him. And so just as we trust the GPS to get us from A to B, are we prepared to trust God to do the same on the greatest journey of our lives? And so GPS, of course, stands for Global Positioning System. And I've heard people talk about this in terms of God's positioning system. And God is the one who is leading us. And in this case, asking for our trust. Trust me. Trust me that where I'm leading you is not only where I want you to go, but where some good things are going to happen to you. And we're going to talk about that in the days to come, about the ways in which God promised to bless Abram. Finally, there's a gentleman who pointed this out. He said, faithfulness is greatest with God On that last day, when we stand before him, he will not ask how much or how many or how big. He will ask how faithful we were with what he gave us. God's measuring stick is faithfulness. And that's really the overall theme, not only of this week's reading from Genesis, and not just the story of Abraham, but really the story of Scripture, of being willing to trust God, to step out in faith when called by God for whatever reason to go wherever it is that God is asking us to go. So we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow on Wednesday. Until then, take care, be well, and hope you have a great day today. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.